The afternoon sun filtered through the worn curtains of apartment 4B as Grace Mitchell sat cross-legged on her second-hand couch, phone clutched in her trembling hands. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks in dark rivers. She had just left her boyfriend Marcus's apartment after discovering text messages between him and her supposed best friend, Jennifer. The betrayal cut deeper than any pain she had experienced before. 2 years of her life, 2 people she trusted most, all reduced to lies and deception. Grace's fingers hovered over her phone screen as she pulled up her sister Hannah's contact. Hannah lived 3 states away in California, but she was the only person Grace could talk to right now, the only one who would understand. Taking a shaky breath, Grace pressed the voice message button and began to speak, her voice breaking with emotion. "Hannah, I don't even know where to start. I went to Marcus's place to surprise him with lunch and he wasn't there, but his laptop was open on the kitchen table. I know I shouldn't have looked, but I saw Jennifer's name and..." Grace's voice cracked as fresh tears spilled down her face. "They've been seeing each other for 6 months. 6 months, Hannah. All those times he said he was working late, all those girls' nights Jennifer cancelled, they were together. I feel so stupid, so worthless. How did I not see it? Everyone I love just keeps leaving or betraying me. First Dad, then Mom moved away, and now this. I don't think I can trust anyone anymore. I'm completely alone in this city, and I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now. Everything hurts so much." She ended the recording and, through her tear-blurred vision, pressed send without double-checking the recipient. The message showed as delivered, and Grace tossed her phone onto the couch cushion beside her, burying her face in her hands as sobs racked her body. 15 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Grace assumed it was Hannah calling her back, but instead, she saw an unknown number had sent a text message. "I think you sent this to the wrong person, but I'm very sorry for what you're going through. Are you safe? Do you need help?" Grace's heart stopped. Horror washed over her as she frantically checked her recent messages and realized her mistake. In her emotional state, she had somehow sent the deeply personal voice message to a number that wasn't saved in her contacts, a number that was only 1 digit different from Hannah's. Her private pain, her vulnerability, her heartbreak, all of it had been delivered to a complete stranger. Her fingers flew across the screen as she typed back, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That was meant for my sister. Please delete it. I'm mortified. I'm fine, just having a terrible day. Again, I'm so sorry." Before she could set the phone down, 3 dots appeared, indicating the stranger was typing. "Please don't be embarrassed. We all have difficult days. I deleted the message, but I want to make sure you're truly okay. Betrayal from people we trust is one of the hardest things to experience." Grace stared at the message, surprised by the kindness from someone who owed her nothing. She typed back, "Thank you for being understanding. I'll be okay eventually. Just need some time to process everything." Another message came through almost immediately. "I know this might sound strange, but I'm actually not far from your area based on the area code. Would it help to talk to someone neutral? Sometimes a stranger's perspective can be clearer than those close to us. No pressure at all, just an offer." Grace hesitated. Every rational part of her brain screamed that meeting a stranger from a wrong number was dangerous and foolish, but something about the messages felt genuine, and after the day she'd had, the thought of sitting alone in her apartment with her thoughts felt unbearable. She glanced around her small, silent living space, the half-packed boxes from Marcus's belongings she had brought back in anger, the photo frames she had turned face down, the life she thought she had built now in ruins around her. Against her better judgment, she typed, "That's very kind, but I couldn't impose. Besides, I probably look like a disaster right now." The response came quickly. "You've just been through something traumatic. No one expects you to look put together, but I understand if you'd rather not. Just know the offer stands. Would it help if I sent you my full name so you could look me up and feel safer? I'm not a serial killer, I promise." Something about the last line made Grace smile for the first time that day, just a small upturn of her lips, but it felt like breaking through concrete. She wrote back, "Okay, that would actually make me feel better." A moment later, the message arrived. "My name is Christopher Westfield. I own a consulting company here in the city. You can find me online. I promise I'm a real person with a legitimate background." Grace quickly typed the name into a search engine, and her eyes widened as results flooded her screen. Christopher Westfield wasn't just a businessman. He was the CEO of Westfield Solutions, one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the region. Articles about his company's expansion, photos of him at charity events, and interviews about his business philosophy filled her screen. He was 34 years old, had built his company from the ground up, and was known for his philanthropic work with organizations supporting people experiencing hardship. The man in the photos was handsome in an understated way, dark hair with hints of grey at the temples, warm brown eyes, and a genuine smile that reached those eyes. He looked trustworthy, professional, and nothing like the kind of person who would harm someone reaching out for help. Still, Grace hesitated. This was surreal. She typed, "I found you. Impressive resume. But why would someone like you want to spend time helping a random stranger who can't even send voice messages to the right person?" His response made her pause. "Because 3 years ago, I was exactly where you are now. Someone I trusted betrayed me in a way that made me question everything. A stranger showed me kindness when I needed it most, and it changed my perspective on human connection. Maybe I can pay that forward." Grace sat with his words, feeling something shift in her chest. She made a decision that felt both reckless and somehow exactly right. "Okay, but somewhere public. There's a coffee shop called The Daily Grind on Madison Street. Do you know it?" "I do." "I can be there in 30 minutes if that works for you." Grace looked at herself in the mirror across the room. Her disheveled hair, stained face, and rumpled clothes told the story of her day. "Give me 45 minutes. I need to make myself presentable." "Take all the time you need. I'll be the guy with the blue folder at a corner table. See you soon, Grace." She froze. She hadn't told him her name. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed, "How do you know my name?" The response came with what she imagined was a gentle tone. "You said it at the beginning of your voice message when you were talking to your sister. I promise I wasn't being creepy. It was just hard to miss. I hope that's okay." Grace let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Of course, she had started the message by saying Hannah's name, and probably her own. "Right. Sorry, I'm just a little paranoid after today." "Completely understandable. See you soon. And Grace, it will get better, I promise." As she set her phone down and headed to the bathroom to wash her face, Grace couldn't shake the surreal nature of what had just happened. A wrong number had connected her to a CEO who was now willing to meet her at a coffee shop to talk through her heartbreak. It seemed like something out of a movie, yet it was happening to her ordinary life. She splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection, wondering if she was making a huge mistake or if something unexpected and meaningful was about to walk into her life. Grace arrived at the Daily Grind 43 minutes later, having managed to repair most of the damage from her earlier breakdown. She had changed into a simple navy sweater and jeans, pulled her honey blonde hair into a neat ponytail, and covered the worst of the redness around her eyes with concealer. Her heart hammered in her chest as she pushed open the door, the familiar scent of roasted coffee beans and vanilla washing over her. She spotted him immediately. Christopher Westfield sat at a corner table near the window, just as he'd promised, a blue folder resting on the table in front of him. He was more striking in person than in his photos, tall, probably 6'2", with an air of quiet confidence that came from someone comfortable in their own skin. He wore a charcoal grey sweater and dark jeans, casual but refined. When he saw her enter and their eyes met, he stood up with a warm smile that immediately put her at ease. "Grace?" he asked, extending his hand as she approached. "That's me," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and his brown eyes held genuine kindness. "Thank you for this. I still can't believe I'm actually here." "I'm glad you came," Christopher said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee, tea, hot chocolate?" "Hot chocolate sounds perfect, actually," Grace admitted. Something about the day made her crave comfort rather than caffeine. Christopher returned a few minutes later with a steaming mug topped with whipped cream and chocolate shavings, along with a black coffee for himself. As he settled back into his chair, Grace noticed he had kind eyes, the kind that had seen pain and emerged with empathy rather than bitterness. "So," Christopher began, wrapping his hands around his mug, "I want you to know that you don't owe me your story. We can talk about anything you want, the weather, books, ridiculous reality TV shows, whatever feels right." Grace took a sip of her hot chocolate, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "That's incredibly nice of you, but you already heard the worst of it in that voice message. I feel like I've already exposed my entire messy life to you." "You exposed your pain," Christopher corrected gently. "That's not the same as your entire life. Pain is just one chapter, not the whole book." Grace felt unexpected tears prick her eyes at his words. "That's a nice way to look at it. Right now, it feels like the pain is the whole story. I understand that feeling, Christopher said, his expression growing more serious. When my ex-fiancée left me 3 years ago, she didn't just break my heart. She emptied our joint bank account and disappeared with my business partner. They had been planning it for months, maybe longer. I lost my relationship, my best friend, and nearly lost my company all in the same week. Grace's eyes widened. That's horrible. How did you survive that? Barely at first, Christopher admitted, a rueful smile crossing his face. I spent 2 weeks on my brother's couch, eating nothing but takeout and questioning every decision I'd ever made. But then something shifted. I realized that their betrayal said everything about them and nothing about my worth. I rebuilt my company from the ground up, stronger than before. And I learned that trust isn't something to withhold from everyone just because a few people proved unworthy of it. Grace absorbed his words, finding comfort in knowing he truly understood what she was going through. How did you learn to trust again? I feel like I'll never be able to let anyone close after this. Time helps, Christopher said thoughtfully. But more than that, I learned to trust myself first. To trust my judgment, my instincts, my ability to recognize genuine people from those wearing masks. You trusted the wrong people, Grace, but that doesn't mean your ability to trust is broken. It means you're learning to be more discerning. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing naturally from heavy topics to lighter ones. Grace found herself laughing for the first time all day when Christopher told her about his disastrous attempt at cooking dinner for potential investors, which ended with the fire department evacuating his apartment building. He asked about her work. She was a graphic designer for a small marketing firm and seemed genuinely interested in her passion for creating book covers in her free time. I've always thought book cover designers don't get enough credit, Christopher said. For you're creating the first impression, the thing that makes someone pick up a story and want to dive in, that's powerful. I've never thought about it that way, Grace replied, feeling a flutter of pride. Marcus had always dismissed her design work as just a hobby, even though she had sold several covers to independent authors. My ex always made it sound like it was insignificant. Christopher's expression hardened slightly. Then he was an idiot who couldn't recognize the value right in front of him. Grace felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. As the afternoon light began to fade outside the window, she realized she had barely thought about Marcus or Jennifer for the past hour. The pain was still there, a dull ache in her chest, but it no longer felt all-consuming. I should probably let you get back to your day, Grace said reluctantly, noticing the coffee shop was beginning to fill with the evening crowd. You've already given me so much of your time. Christopher checked his watch and looked surprised. I had no idea it had been that long. I was supposed to review contracts an hour ago, but honestly, this has been a much better use of my afternoon. As they stood to leave, Christopher hesitated, then said, I know this might be forward, and please feel free to say no, but would you like to have dinner sometime? Not as a date, he added quickly, seeing her expression, just as friends. I think you could use someone neutral in your corner right now, and I'd enjoy continuing our conversation. Grace considered his offer. Every instinct told her she should say no, should go home and process her breakup alone, should maintain appropriate boundaries with this stranger, who had somehow become less strange over the past hour. But something about Christopher felt safe, genuine, like meeting him had been meant to happen exactly the way it did. I'd like that, she heard herself say. As friends. Christopher's smile was warm and understanding. Perfect. How about Thursday evening? There's a small Italian place called Angelo's that has the best pasta in the city. Very casual, very low pressure. They exchanged actual phone numbers this time, laughing about the circumstances of their first contact. As Grace walked to her car, she felt lighter than she had in hours. She pulled out her phone and finally sent a proper voice message to Hannah, telling her everything that had happened. The betrayal, the wrong number, the unexpected coffee date with a CEO who understood her pain. What Grace didn't know was that Christopher sat in his own car for several minutes after she left, staring at her contact information in his phone. He hadn't been entirely honest with her. Yes, his ex-fiancée had betrayed him. Yes, he had rebuilt his life and learned to trust again. But what he hadn't mentioned was that his business partner who had betrayed him was his own brother, a wound that had never fully healed. And the reason he had been in her area when he received her message wasn't coincidence. He had just left a meeting at a building 2 blocks from her apartment, having been hired to consult on a major project. Christopher knew he should have told her these details, but something had held him back. Perhaps it was the vulnerability in her voice message, the raw honesty that had touched something deep within him, or perhaps it was the way she had looked at him in the coffee shop, not seeing his success or his money, but seeing him as simply someone who understood her pain. As he started his car, Christopher made a decision. He would tell her the truth about his brother at dinner. No more omissions, no matter how small. If this friendship was going to be built on trust, it needed to start with complete honesty. What neither of them realized was that Marcus, desperate to win Grace back after realizing his mistake, had already begun making plans to show up at her apartment. And Jennifer, consumed with guilt, was debating whether to confess that the affair had been Marcus's idea from the start, a way to make Grace jealous enough to commit more fully to their relationship. The betrayal ran deeper than Grace knew, and the revelations waiting in the shadows would test everything she thought she understood about the past 2 years of her life. But for now, driving home through the city streets as twilight painted the sky purple and gold, Grace allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hopeful. Thursday evening arrived faster than Grace expected. She had spent the past 3 days in a fog of emotions, answering dozens of apologetic texts from Marcus that she ultimately ignored, blocking Jennifer on all social media, and throwing herself into a new book cover project to keep her mind occupied. But through it all, she found herself looking forward to dinner with Christopher more than she wanted to admit. She chose a burgundy dress that hit just above the knee, paired with a cream cardigan and simple gold jewelry. As she applied a final coat of mascara, her phone buzzed with a message from Christopher. Running 5 minutes late. Client call went long. So sorry. Order an appetizer on me if you get there first. Grace smiled at the message and grabbed her purse. Angelo's was a 15-minute walk from her apartment, and the crisp autumn air felt refreshing against her skin. The restaurant was tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, its warm light spilling onto the sidewalk through large windows. She could see red-checkered tablecloths and rustic wooden beams inside, exactly the kind of cozy, unpretentious place she loved. She was about to enter when she heard her name called from behind. Turning, she saw Marcus jogging toward her, his face flushed and desperate. Her stomach dropped. "Grace, please just hear me out," Marcus said breathlessly, stopping a few feet away. He looked disheveled, his usually neat brown hair uncombed, dark circles under his blue eyes. "I've been trying to reach you for days." "I don't want to talk to you, Marcus," Grace said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. "I have dinner plans." "With who?" Marcus demanded, his tone shifting to something possessive that Grace had never noticed before. "You're already seeing someone else. We just broke up." "That's none of your business," Grace replied, taking a step back. "You lost the right to know anything about my life when you decided to sleep with my best friend." "It was a mistake." Marcus's voice rose, drawing glances from passers-by. "Jennifer meant nothing. She threw herself at me and I was weak. But it's you I love, Grace. It's always been you." Before Grace could respond, a calm voice spoke from behind her. "Is everything okay here?" She turned to see Christopher approaching, his expression polite, but his eyes sharp and assessing. He moved to stand beside Grace, a subtle protective presence that made her feel instantly safer. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus asked, his jaw tightening. "A friend," Christopher replied evenly. "And you are?" "Her boyfriend," Marcus shot back. "Ex-boyfriend," Grace corrected quickly. "Marcus, this is Christopher. Christopher, this is Marcus, the person I was telling you about." Understanding flickered across Christopher's face. He extended his hand to Marcus with practiced professionalism. "Nice to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Marcus ignored the offered handshake, his attention fixed on Grace. "So this is what you do? You move on in less than a week? You're pathetic." Christopher's demeanor shifted instantly. His voice dropped to a tone that was quiet but carried unmistakable authority. "I'm going to ask you to leave, now. This is between me and Grace." "No," Christopher interrupted, his tall frame somehow seeming even larger. "This is about a man harassing a woman who has made it clear she doesn't want to speak with him. You can leave on your own, or I can call the police and let them explain why you need to leave. Your choice." Marcus's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. He looked at Grace, seeming to search for any sign that she would defend him, but she remained silent, standing closer to Christopher. Finally, Marcus spat out, "You'll regret this, Grace, when you realize what you're giving up." He turned and stalked away, disappearing around the corner. Grace released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, her entire body beginning to shake with delayed reaction. "Are you okay?" Christopher asked gently, his hand hovering near her shoulder, but not quite touching, giving her space. "I don't know," Grace admitted, her voice unsteady. "I've never seen him like that, so aggressive and angry. Sometimes people show their true colors when they lose control, Christopher said. Come on, let's get inside, you're shaking. Inside Angelo's, the warmth and delicious aroma of garlic and tomatoes helped ground Grace back in the present moment. They were seated at a quiet corner table, and Christopher ordered a bottle of red wine without looking at the menu, clearly a regular here. I'm sorry you had to witness that, Grace said once they were alone. That's not exactly how I wanted to start the evening. Don't apologize for his behavior, Christopher replied, pouring wine into her glass. Though I have to admit I'm concerned. Has he shown up like that before? Grace shook her head. Never. He was always so calm, so controlled. That's what made him attractive initially. He seemed stable and predictable. Stable and predictable or emotionally distant? Christopher asked perceptively. Grace paused, the question hitting closer to home than she expected. Maybe both. Looking back, I realize I was always trying to earn his attention, his approval. He was always just out of reach emotionally. That's not love, Christopher said quietly. That's manipulation. Real love doesn't make you question your worth or chase after crumbs of affection. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their server, a cheerful older woman named Rosa who clearly knew Christopher well. My favorite customer, and you brought a beautiful date. Just friends, Rosa, Christopher said with a warm smile, though Grace noticed the slightest hint of pink on his cheeks. That's what they all say. Rosa winked conspiratorially at Grace. Now, what can I get for you two just friends? They ordered chicken parmesan for Grace and seafood linguine for Christopher, and as Rosa bustled away, Grace felt the tension from the Marcus encounter beginning to fade. Can I ask you something? Grace said, swirling the wine in her glass. You've been incredibly kind to me, but we barely know each other. Why are you really doing this? Christopher set down his own glass and met her eyes directly. Because I see something in you that I recognize in myself from a few years ago. You're hurt and questioning everything, but underneath that pain there's incredible strength. You just don't see it yet. I don't feel very strong, Grace admitted. Strength isn't about not feeling pain, Christopher said. It's about continuing to move forward despite it. You could have stayed home these past few days, hidden away, and let the betrayal define you. Instead, you're here, facing the world, even facing your ex when he ambushed you. That takes courage. Grace felt tears prick her eyes, but these were different from the ones she'd shed earlier in the week. These came from being truly seen and valued. Thank you, she whispered. There's something I need to tell you, Christopher said, his expression growing serious. I wasn't completely honest when we first met. Grace's heart skipped. What do you mean? The business partner who betrayed me, it was my brother, Daniel. We built the company together, and when he and my fiancée ran off with the money, it destroyed my family. My parents took his side, said I must have done something to push him away. I haven't spoken to any of them in 3 years. Grace reached across the table and placed her hand over his. I'm so sorry. That's unimaginably painful. I should have told you from the beginning, Christopher continued. I don't want there to be any secrets between us, even small ones. If we're going to be friends or anything else, it needs to be built on complete honesty. Or anything else? Grace repeated, her pulse quickening. Christopher held her gaze. I know the timing is terrible. You're just out of a relationship, and you need time to heal, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a connection with you that goes beyond just wanting to help a stranger. From the moment I heard your voice message, something in me recognized something in you. Before Grace could respond, her phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. There were 7 missed calls from an unknown number and a text message from Jennifer. Grace, I need to talk to you right now. It's about Marcus. You're in danger. Please call me. Grace showed the message to Christopher, her hand trembling. What does she mean, I'm in danger? Christopher's expression turned serious as he pulled out his own phone. Call her. Put it on speaker so I can hear. Grace dialed Jennifer's number with shaking fingers. Jennifer answered on the first ring, her voice high and panicked. Grace, thank God, listen to me carefully. Marcus has been lying about everything. The affair wasn't my idea. He planned it. He said he wanted to make you jealous, to make you dependent on him. But tonight he called me ranting about you and some guy, saying he wasn't going to let you move on. Grace, I think he's been following you. I found tracking software on my phone that he installed months ago. If he had access to my phone, he might have had access to yours too. Grace's blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying check your phone for apps you didn't install. And Grace, Marcus isn't who you think he is. His real name isn't even Marcus Williams. I found documents in his apartment. His name is Marcus Brennan, and he has a record for stalking in another state. I'm at the police station right now. You need to come here and file a report. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too close. Grace looked at Christopher, seeing her own shock reflected in his eyes. Everything she thought she knew about the past 2 years was crumbling into dust, revealing something dark and disturbing underneath. The police station's fluorescent lights felt harsh and unforgiving as Grace sat in a grey plastic chair, Christopher beside her, his presence a steady anchor in the storm. Detective Maria Hernandez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, sat across from them reviewing Grace's statement. Jennifer had already given her account and was in another room, visibly shaken, but cooperating fully. "Miss Mitchell, I want you to understand that what you've experienced is serious," Detective Hernandez said, sliding several printed documents across the table. "Marcus Brennan has a restraining order filed against him in Oregon from 2019. A woman named Patricia Chen reported that he used a false identity to date her, installed tracking software on her devices, and became increasingly controlling and volatile when she tried to end the relationship." Grace stared at the documents, her hands clenched in her lap. Christopher gently placed his hand over hers, a quiet gesture of support. "How did I not know any of this?" she whispered. "He's practiced," the detective said frankly. "Men like Brennan are skilled at creating false identities and manipulating their victims. He likely chose you carefully, studied your vulnerabilities, and crafted a persona designed to appeal to you." "But Jennifer," Grace said, confused. "Why would he involve her?" According to Ms. Porter's statement, he told her it was a psychology experiment for his graduate thesis, something about testing relationship dynamics and jealousy responses. He showed her fake university credentials and paid her $2,000 to participate. She claims she didn't realize the true nature of what he was doing until she found his real documentation last week. Grace felt bile rise in her throat. So our entire relationship was what? Some sick game? "It appears he has a pattern of selecting women, establishing control through emotional manipulation, and then escalating when they try to leave," Detective Hernandez explained. "The affair with Ms. Porter seems to have been his way of isolating you further, removing your support system while making you more dependent on him." Christopher's jaw clenched. "What happens now?" "We've issued a warrant for his arrest. His apartment has been cleared out. He left sometime this afternoon after the confrontation outside the restaurant. We've flagged his known aliases, and we're working with Oregon authorities since he violated his restraining order by leaving that state." The detective turned to Grace. "In the meantime, I strongly recommend you stay somewhere he wouldn't know to look for you. Do you have family nearby?" "My sister's in California," Grace said, her mind reeling. "I could go there." "Actually," Christopher interjected carefully, "my company owns a secured apartment building downtown, corporate housing for visiting executives. It has 24-hour security, key card access, and cameras throughout. Grace could stay there until this is resolved." Detective Hernandez nodded approvingly. "That would work. Mr. Westfield, I'll need your contact information and the building's security details for our records." 2 hours later, Grace found herself in a spacious, modern apartment on the 15th floor of a sleek building in the heart of downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city lights, and the space was furnished with comfortable contemporary pieces that managed to feel both luxurious and welcoming. Christopher set down the overnight bag they'd picked up from Grace's apartment, under police escort, and turned to her. "The kitchen is fully stocked. There are fresh linens in the closet. Security has my number and Detective Hernandez's. You're safe here, Grace." Grace walked to the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass against the city beyond. "How did I get here?" she said softly. "A week ago, I thought I had a boyfriend who loved me, a best friend I trusted, a normal life. Now I find out I've been living with a stalker who fabricated everything." Christopher approached slowly, standing beside her at the window. "You got here because you survived, because you're stronger than he ever anticipated. He thought breaking you down would make you easier to control, but instead, you reached out for help. You sent that voice message to the wrong number, and it changed everything." "Do you believe in fate?" Grace asked, turning to look at him. "That things happen for a reason. I believe in moments," Christopher said thoughtfully. "Moments when we make choices that alter the trajectory of our lives. You chose to meet me at that coffee shop. You chose to trust again, even after being hurt. Those were your choices, your strength." "And what about you?" Grace asked. "Why did you choose to answer that message? You could have just deleted it and moved on with your day." Christopher was quiet for a moment, his expression vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "Because 3 years ago, when my world fell apart, I sent a desperate email to what I thought was my lawyer's address. It went to a professor at the local university instead, Dr. Patricia Morrison. She wrote back with such kindness and wisdom that we ended up corresponding for months. She helped me rebuild my sense of self-worth and trust. When she passed away last year from cancer, I promised myself I would pay forward the grace she showed me. Tears slipped down Grace's cheeks. I'm so sorry for your loss. She taught me that our darkest moments can become doorways to our greatest transformations, Christopher said, gently wiping away her tears with his thumb. Grace, I know this situation with Marcus is terrifying and painful, but it's also revealing truth. Would you rather have married him, had children with him and discovered this 10 years from now, or face it now when you still have your whole life ahead of you? Now, Grace whispered. Definitely now. They stood there in the soft lamplight, the city humming below them, and Grace felt something shift inside her chest. The pain was still there, but it no longer felt like it would consume her. Instead, it felt like something she could learn from, grow from, transform into wisdom and strength. Stay, she said suddenly, surprising herself. Not in a romantic way, she added quickly. Just, I don't want to be alone tonight. We could talk or watch a movie or just sit here. I just need someone real nearby. Christopher smiled gently. I'll take the couch. And Grace, you're never going to be alone in this, not while I'm around. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of police interviews, court proceedings, and therapy sessions. Marcus was arrested trying to board a flight to Mexico, using another false identity. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Tracking software on Grace's phone and laptop, a storage unit full of photographs he'd taken of her without her knowledge, detailed journals documenting his manipulation strategies. Patricia Chen, his previous victim, flew in to testify. And her story was so similar to Grace's that it made the pattern undeniable. Throughout it all, Christopher was there, not smothering or controlling, but present. He accompanied her to court dates if she wanted company. He sent encouraging text messages on difficult days. He introduced her to Dr. Raymond Foster, an excellent therapist who specialized in recovery from emotional abuse. Slowly, Grace began to reclaim pieces of herself she hadn't realized she'd lost. One evening in early December, 6 weeks after the wrong voice message that had changed everything, Grace invited Christopher to her apartment, her real apartment, which she'd returned to after Marcus was sentenced to 5 years in prison, for stalking, identity fraud, and violation of restraining orders. She had spent the day preparing a home-cooked meal, something she hadn't done since before Marcus. The apartment looked different now. She'd repainted the walls a warm cream color, hung her own artwork, and filled the space with plants and books that reflected her true personality rather than what Marcus had preferred. Christopher arrived with a bottle of wine and a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite. The place looks amazing, he said, looking around with genuine admiration. It feels like you. That's the point, Grace said with a smile. I realized I'd been living in spaces that reflected other people's preferences for so long that I'd forgotten what I actually liked. Turns out, I love plants, bright colors, and organized chaos. Over dinner, homemade lasagna that Grace had perfected over the past few weeks, they talked about everything and nothing. Christopher shared stories about expanding his business into 3 new cities. Grace excitedly showed him the book cover she'd designed that had been featured in a major publishing industry magazine. Their conversation flowed with the easy rhythm of people who had grown to know each other deeply. As they cleared the dishes together, Grace turned to Christopher. I need to tell you something. I'm listening, he said, setting down the plate he'd been holding. When I sent that voice message to the wrong number, I was at my lowest point. I felt broken, worthless, and completely alone, Grace began, her voice steady. But that mistake, that random twist of fate or moment or whatever you want to call it, it brought you into my life, and you showed me what genuine kindness looks like, what real support feels like. You never tried to fix me or tell me what to do. You just stood beside me and believed I was strong enough to fix myself. Christopher stepped closer, his eyes soft. You were always strong enough, Grace. You just needed to remember it. I know that now, Grace said, and I know the timing might still not be perfect, and I know we said we'd just be friends, but Christopher... She took a breath, gathering her courage. I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I've been falling for weeks, maybe from that very first coffee date, and I needed to tell you because after everything that happened with Marcus, I promised myself I'd always be honest about my feelings. Christopher's face broke into a smile that transformed his usually composed features into something radiant. "Grace Mitchell, I have been waiting to hear you say something like that for 6 weeks. I've been in love with you since the second week we knew each other, but I didn't want to rush you or make you feel pressured." "You love me," Grace whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "Completely," Christopher said, cupping her face in his hands. "Your strength, your creativity, your resilience, your terrible jokes, the way you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating, all of it. But I needed you to heal first, to choose me from a place of wholeness rather than need." "I am choosing you," Grace said firmly. "From wholeness, from strength, from clarity. I'm choosing you, Christopher Westfield." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It felt nothing like the desperate, uncertain kisses she'd shared with Marcus. This felt like coming home, like finding something real and solid and true. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Christopher rested his forehead against hers. "So, what happens now?" Grace laughed, the sound bright and free. Now we figure it out together. No games, no manipulation, no false identities, just two people who found each other in the most unexpected way and decided to build something real." "I like the sound of that," Christopher murmured. 6 months later, Grace stood in the study of the home she now shared with Christopher, a beautiful brownstone with space for both his home office and her design studio. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the book covers she'd created that now lined one wall, each one a testament to her growing success as a freelance designer. Her phone buzzed with a message from Hannah. "Can't wait to visit next month. Still can't believe my sister's wrong number turned into this fairy tale." "You need to write a book about it," Grace smiled and typed back. "Not a fairy tale, just real life. Messy, unexpected, beautiful real life." She heard Christopher's footsteps on the stairs, and moments later, he appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee, just the way she liked hers, with cream and a touch of cinnamon. "What are you smiling about?" he asked, handing her the mug. "Just thinking about how one mistake changed everything," Grace said, leaning into his embrace. "If I had sent that message to the right number, I'd probably still be with Marcus, completely unaware of who he really was." "The universe has a funny way of correcting our course," Christopher said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right one." Grace thought about the voice message she'd sent through tears and heartbreak, never imagining that her vulnerability would become a bridge to something extraordinary. She thought about the CEO who had chosen compassion over convenience, who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. And she thought about the journey from that broken afternoon to this peaceful morning, every difficult step worth it, for the love and authenticity she'd found. "You know what?" Grace said, turning in Christopher's arms to face him. "I'm glad I can't send voice messages properly." Christopher laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Best technical difficulty ever. Outside the window, the city continued its endless rhythm, full of people sending messages, making mistakes, and finding unexpected connections. Somewhere out there, someone else was probably sending a voice message to the wrong number. And maybe, just maybe, it would change their life too, because sometimes the wrong number is exactly right.